Hello everyone, I am Kumar, and in today's lecture we are going to study about a very important topic from modern India or colonial India. The topic is called the theory of drain of wealth. It became the basis of economic nationalism in India. For the first time when nationalism started in India after 1857, or let's say in 1880s, because from 1857 till 1880s there was formation of so many regional organizations. When the formation of regional organizations culminated in the formation of Congress, the Indian National Congress, for the first time in 1885, the moderate leaders of Congress took over the leadership. And the first critique they developed against the British Raj was an economic critique. The theory of drain of wealth or the theory of economic nationalism is not only important because it was the first trigger of Indian nationalism, but I think personally, and most of the students of history would, I think, agree to it, that it is more important because this was the first theory which broke the trust of Indian masses, Indian people, to their government. This was the first theory which made the people of India realize that they have been looted, that their wealth, their hard-earned money has been looted since 1757, since the capture of Bengal. It's a bit of complex theory. We don't, study it economically. Rather, we study it historically. We will look into the elements of drain of wealth. We will look into how it functions, how it functioned. We will look into how the, exchange of council bills happened, and how did this drain happen altogether? What was the mechanism of it? There is a historian called Sumit Sarkar. He has explained very well in his book, Modern India. The book covers the time period from 1885, right from the formation of Congress till 1947. In his book, Sumit Sarkar, he's a Marxist historian, one of my favorite, and he covers this topic in very great detail because it is the peculiar feature of Marxist historians that they focus on economic perspective of history. They identify the economic factors of each and every phenomena of history. So, if you read books of Shekhar Bandyopadhyay or book of Bipin Chandra, in fact, Bipin Chandra has written a different book about the functioning of colonialism and how imperialism and colonialism functions, and in that also he has dealt with this topic. But the way Sumit Sarkar has dealt with this topic in his book is remarkable. And I think the way UPSC is approaching questions these years, since last 5 to 6 years, it is getting more deeper and deeper into every topic of history. So we need to know the core and basics of the drain of wealth theory. And today we will try to figure out how the drain of wealth from India happened, what was the mechanism of it, how did the exchange happen, and how did India bleed out of its wealth, as Dadabhai Naoroji termed it. Before formally starting with the topic, I would like to take you into a bit of background of how drain started. And in order to understand how drain started, we will have to understand what was the situation before the drain was actually happening, before the drain started. British came as traders, and the first territory they captured was Bengal. And that happened after the successful win in 2 successive battles. The first was the Battle of Plassey, of course, the famous Battle of Plassey, which changed the course of history of India, which can be claimed as the battle responsible for the colonization of India. First was the Battle of Plassey in 1757, and the second was the Battle of Buxar in 1764. These 2 battles radically changed the way we see India today. Why I say this? In order to understand this, you'll have to understand how did British Raj, or how did the company, let's not call it British Raj back then, let's call it a company, a private company, which was the East India Company. How did the company function before the Battle of Plassey? Because in Battle of Plassey, Bengal is the first territory which they are capturing. Before that, they are merely traders. They are merely traders who are trying to expand their trade, who are trying to, influence the people of India, who are trying to gain control of people of India by defeating the principalities. However, Plassey was the first instance when they actually did it. So before Plassey, I'll give you a very simple example. Before Plassey, if I am a British and I live in India and I have to buy something in the market, I will have to pay the person who is selling to me. Let's say I have to buy a pot, a handicraft. Let's say a handicraft, simple handicraft, or a pot. Let's consider a pot. In order to buy a pot, I'll have to pay the person, the Indian person who has made that pot, out of my own pocket. Now, where does the money come to me? From where does the money come to me? I am a British. Of course, in order to pay him, I'll have to bring bullions from back home, from London, from Britain. So if I have to buy something from Indian market, I will have to pay my own money, which I have brought in the form of bullions from Britain to the person. This is very simple. There is nothing very complex going on here, right? But this situation changed after the Battle of Plassey and Battle of Buxar, because now the company became the new Nawabs of Bengal. They proclaimed themselves as the new Nawab of Bengal. They got the zamindari rights of Bengal. They got the right to tax the people of Bengal. And this changed radically the way empire functioned. This changed radically the way the company functioned, the East India Company functioned. I'll take the same example again and explain how it happened. Earlier, I was paying for the matka, for the pot, with my own pocket, with my own bullion, which I have bought from England and changed it into the Indian rupees, and then I paid him. So the matka was bought from my own pocket, from my own money. Now, after Battle of Plassey, now after the Battle of Buxar, when I have got the zamindari rights over the whole territory of Bengal, I don't need to do this. I don't need to bring my bullion from Britain and pay that Indian merchant or Indian handicraft person. I don't need to pay him from my own pocket, because now I have got the taxation rights. So what I'll do now, instead of bringing my own bullions from Britain and exchanging it into rupees, I will tax the people of Bengal. Let's say I taxed him first. The person who is selling me the matka, I first taxed him. I took the tax from him. Using the same money which he gave me, I'm explaining it in a very vague, very simple form. We will come to the complexities further in the lecture. First, let us try to understand this situation in a very day-to-day life example, right? What I will do now after the Battle of Buxar, I will first take the tax from the person. Since I have the right to tax him now, I am the company, I am the Nawab now, I am running the dual government, because they started dual government after the capture of Bengal. So I taxed him, I took the money from me in the name of tax, and from the same money, I bought his matka. So first he was looted when he paid me the tax, which was much beyond his expectations, which was highly exorbitant, which was very high from the normal rates. So first time he was looted when he paid me the tax. Second time, he'll be looted when I sell him the same product after sending it to Britain. So what I'll do now, I taxed him, I took the money, and I bought the matka from the same money, right? So his money, some part of his money goes to him. I'll take the same matka, trade it back to Britain, send it back to Britain. And let us consider in Britain, I sent that same matka or the pot to the industry where some designs were made over it. Now the same matka returns back to India, return back to me, in fact. And I go to him, I forcefully sell the same matka which he sent to me, which he sold to me. I sell the same matka with some designs at a higher price. So this is the third time I am looting him. First, when he paid the tax. Second, when I bought his matka at lower price. And third, when I'm selling his own matka with some designs made from back England at higher price. So now he's being looted for the third time, right? So this was the loot which was constantly going on from 1757 till 1947. It went on till 1947. It did not stop. It's just that the people of India got to know about it. And it was much late when they got to know about it. It happened much after that. In fact, it took around 120 years, because 1757 till 1880s will count almost 120 years. It only happened, the people of India got to know about this loot only when the theory of economic nationalism, the theory of drain of wealth was created by the Indian intelligentsia, by the English educated moderate leaders, the intelligentsia of India, who started on the basis of drain of wealth theory, who started the economic nationalism in India. And this same economic nationalism became the base of later on mass movements of Gandhian nationalism. When he took on the same issue in some other form, in the form of Khadi, in the form of Swadesi, when he highlighted the same issue again and again, that you are being looted of your wealth. In the terms of Dadabhai Naoroji, if we call it, in the terms of Dadabhai Naoroji, India was being bled out of its wealth. India was bleeding wealth. And the whole money was being sent out to Britain. At the same time, industrialization was going on in Britain. Britain was the first nation to witness industrialization. I'm just giving a premise now. I have not yet come to the complexities and the definitions and the exam part. I'm just giving a premise. At the same time, Britain was being industrialized. Industrialization had already started in Britain. When industrialization was going on in Britain, India was being deindustrialized. So Britain usually often boasts of these achievements that we were the first nation to be industrialized. But what was the cost of it? Britain was being industrialized at the cost of deindustrialization of India. There was an ongoing deindustrialization in India. This deindustrialization in India, this has been proven by two facts. First, there was a decline in the indigenous handicraft industry of India, the handlooms, the small scale industries, which were already functioning in India. They underwent decline. There was a total collapse of those industries. And second, the second proof which shows that there was an ongoing deindustrialization in India with parallel industrialization of Britain is that the workers of India, common workers of India, which were earlier employed in the handloom industries, which were earlier employed in the Indian handicraft industries, they started migrating to their villages. They started shifting to agricultural practices. So earlier they used to be workers. Now they became peasants. So there was a shift of population from urban working classes to rural working classes in the form of workers to peasants. So this was the second proof why we say that there was a parallel deindustrialization of India when Britain was being industrialized. Therefore, we say that India's wealth was being drained out of it. India's wealth was being drained out of it and transferred to Britain. Now we come to the definition of drain of wealth. So after the formation of Congress in 1850s, when the moderates took over the leadership of the Congress, in fact, most of them, let's not say most of them, but leaving Bal Gangadhar Tilak and his followers, every other leader of Congress back then, before the arrival of Gandhi, used to be a moderate. So moderates, leaving Lal Bal Pal, right? Not Lal Bahadur Shastri, Bal Gangadhar Tilak, Bipin Chandra Pal, and how can I forget? I'm forgetting the third name. Anyway, so leaving these three leaders from Punjab, Bengal, and I'm forgetting the third name. So leaving these three leaders, most of the leaders of the Congress were moderates. And when they took over the leadership, they started highlighting the problems of economy of India. When nationalism started in India, when they came back from England, when they came back from Europe after their studies, they took over the leadership. And the first sight of nationalism in the eyes of common masses of India was the sight of economic nationalism. The personalities related to this economic nationalism were various. The questions over personalities is very common in competitive exams, both in state level exams and UPSC, of course. So the leading name was R.C. Dutt. The leading name was Dadabhai Naoroji. The leading name was G.V. Joshi. Leading name was Gopal Krishna Gokhale. All these leaders, Firoz Shah Mehta, all these leaders started highlighting that India was being looted of its wealth. The epicenter of it, the climax of it came when Dadabhai Naoroji wrote a book. It was called Poverty and Un-British Rule in India. So before this book, before they theorized the drain of wealth, people of India did not know that they were poor because India was being looted. Because India used to be a mighty empire. India used to be a major trade center. I think as far as my numbers are correct, 33% was the share of trade of India. I think export of India was, the share of export of India was 33% in the world market before the coming of British, when the Mughals were in power. And when the British left India, it dropped down to merely 3%. This was the recent figure given by the researchers of Utsa Patnaik and etc. And recently, Shashi Tharoor has also championed this cause when he defeated all his champions back in Britain. I think it was Oxford or Cambridge, the famous debate that he won. He won a lot of applause there. And he also wrote this book, The Dark Age. So I've read this book and it's very interesting. If you're not preparing for UPSC, you must give it a read. However, if you're preparing for UPSC, do not jump onto that book. That is not a book of history. In fact, it is an argumentative book. So you can borrow some elements from that book. In fact, the book that every UPSC student read, the Spectrum book, has collected the thoughts from that book also. Some of the views of Shashi Tharoor has been given in that book in some boxes, as far as I can remember. So yeah, where was I? Yeah. So the first time this theory of drain of wealth came out, or the climax of economic nationalism reached, when Dadabhai Naoroji wrote the book called Poverty and Un-British Rule in India. In this book, he for the first time related poverty in India, the causes of poverty in India, to the prevalence of British Raj. People of India were not aware that we were poor because of British. They thought that the poverty of India is just a given situation that they are born in. Poverty is natural. They did not see poverty as some kind of consequence of some economic reasons. So this book for the first time highlighted that your poverty, the poverty of people of India, is not because of some given situation. It is because there are some economic reasons to it. It is because you have been looted out of your wealth since last 120 years. Right? In this theory particularly, in this book only, he gave this theory of drain of wealth, in which he argued that most of the wealth of India has been drained out of India. And this wealth has been unrequited and unilateral transfer. The transfer of this wealth has been unilateral. The transfer of this wealth has been unrequited. And you should know the meaning of unrequited. Unrequited means something which is not given back. Something, if you give something to someone and in return you don't get anything back, that means it is a unrequited wealth transfer, right? In the same way, unilateral. If you give some money to the shopkeeper and the shopkeeper doesn't give you anything back, that means it's a unilateral transfer. It's an unrequited transfer. So he, for the first time, Dadabhai Naoroji, for the first time theorized that the transfer of wealth from India has been unrequited, has been unilateral. India has gained nothing out of it. If you hear the British argument, they would argue very polar to it. They would say, no, we have invested in India. They called the drain of wealth of India as investments. For example, they would argue, we made railways. And railways was for the people of India, for the benefit of the people of India. What was the reality? The reality was also highlighted by these economic nationalists. They, for the first time, started arguing that your railways is not for our benefit. You are using railways to extract India out of its minerals. To extract minerals out of India. You are using railways for your own benefits. None of the railway lines are back then were functioning for the people of India. Then they would argue that, we gave you the telegraph. No, you didn't give us the telegraph. Telegraph was introduced by Lord Dalhousie to be used for the empire of British, not for the Indians. So all those investments that they made in India for themselves, they used to argue that these investments are for the people of India. However, the scene was exactly polar to it. However, the reality was exactly polar to it. So he argued that the rule of British in India is not British. He meant that the British rule, as it argues, is very liberal. British have always argued that we are the first parliamentary democracy of the world. We are the ones who have given liberalism to people. We are the ones who have established democracy in the world. We were the first one to experience a parliament. So British rule in Britain was very British. British rule in Britain was very British. But the way Britain was ruling India was not British. It was un-British. It was opposite of what they claimed to be. It was not based on equality. It was not based on parliamentary democracy. It was based on mere exploitation of Indian resources for the development of Britain, for the industrialization of Britain. Therefore, the name of his book was Poverty and Un-British Rule of India. The way they were ruling India was not British. It was un-British. And since they were ruling India in an un-British way, therefore poverty prevailed in India. बहुत ही simple argument है. It's a very simple argument which people of India understood for the first time. And therefore the spark of nationalism ignited among the people of India. Right? So two things. The drain of wealth theory was given by Dadabhai Naoroji, championed by other leaders like P.C. Joshi, like R.C. Dutt, like G.V. Joshi, like Subramania Iyer, K. Subramania Iyer. There are two Subramania Iyer. Do not be confused. The S. Subramania Iyer leader comes later on in the mass nationalism. This is K. Subramania Iyer, who is related to the economic nationalism. And then there was Firoz Shah Mehta, then there was Gopal Krishna Gokhale, and many others. So these are the most prominent names who were championing the cause of economic nationalism. So you can easily define what is the drain of wealth. Drain of wealth is nothing but the flow of Indian wealth, flow of Indian money, Indian resources out of India in an unrequited manner, in a unilateral manner, right? I'll just give you a number. What happened before Plassey, as the numbers say, before the Plassey, before 1757, it's a very interesting number that I don't know, it just clicked my mind. It was not there in my mind earlier. So before the Battle of Plassey, in 50 years, bullions from Britain to India amounted for merely 20 million. And after the Battle of Plassey from 1757 till 1766 or 1767, something like that, within a span of 8 to 9 years, the money flowing out of India amounted for 50 million rupees. So this simple number shows the amount of loot that started after the capture of Bengal, because now they were the ones who were in power. And from this money, they built their military. From this money, they built their power. They mobilized their resources. And then they went on capturing other states. Then they went on capturing Mysore. They captured Punjab. They defeated the Marathas. They captured Hyderabad. They started subsidiary alliance, and then they shifted to doctrine of lapse. So till 1856, this loot was going unchecked. This loot of Indian money was going unchecked from 1757 till 1856. And finally, Indian people rebelled in 1857. However, back then they did not know that this loot is going on until it was first highlighted by leaders like Dadabhai Naoroji and R.C. Dutt. So you can simply define what is drain of wealth. It is unrequited transfer of wealth. It is unilateral transfer of wealth. It is indirect transfer of wealth, which was never coming back to India. It was a mere loot. India was bleeding out of its money by the British. India was being bled out of its money in the terms of Dadabhai Naoroji. Now, we will come to, there is one more thing that I want to discuss here before coming to the elements of drain. What were the elements of drain? The drain did not merely happen directly. It also happened indirectly in the form of private trade, in the form of dastaks, in the form of dastus, in the form of nazrana. Right? These are all forms of indirect trade, indirect drain. Sorry. So dastaks were, as you must be knowing, dastaks were the written agreements which people had to show at the trade posts in order to get their goods passed. Right? So in place of money, in place of bullions, or in place of Indian money, they used to write dastaks. Then there was nazrana. Nazrana was just, as the word suggests, nazrana means bait. It's just a form of bribery, nothing else. Then direct tax exactions, direct tax loot. Then revenue in the form of land revenue, permanent settlement, Rayatwari settlement. All of that started coming later on. After Plassey, all these three settlements, along with other forms of taxation and private trade. How can you forget private trade? So apart from the official trade of the British, apart from the official trade of the East India Company, the company officials also were engaged in private trade. What is private trade? Private trade is a kind of illegal trade. For example, let's say I work with Microsoft and I deal with selling and purchasing the materials for Microsoft. But that I do in the name of company, with the stamp of company. What if I start dealing with the same product with the sale and purchase of the same product in my own name instead of company? All the money will go to me, not to the company. That means I'm doing a private trade. I'm not doing the trade for the sake of company then. That is an illegal trade. So apart from the trade for the company officials were also engaged in their own private trade. And there's this bizarre number or bizarre fact that I'm going to give you. The champion of private trade, Lord Clive, the one who fought the Battle of Plassey, who was involved in the Plassey conspiracy, he was such a champion of private trade that when he went back to England, his own wealth amounted much more than the company's wealth. He had done such a humongous amount of private trade. And then he was trialed in the court, and then he committed suicide out of guilt. Whether it was out of guilt or not, I'm not exactly sure. But this is the story how it goes. So such was the impact of private trade. Sometimes the calculations of private trade would be even more than the company trade. Not sometimes, in fact, most of the times. So the loot of Indian money was not only direct, it was indirect. It was in so many other ways that we cannot imagine. And this whole scenario was for the first time highlighted after 1885, after the formation of Congress, after the moderate leadership took over the Congress. Now we come to the elements of drain. What were the elements of drain? The drain of wealth happened, we know. The drain of wealth happened in so many ways. But what were the elements? In what forms did it happen? Right? We now know the ways. We now know the ways in which the drain started. But in what forms? What was the mechanism? Now we come to the mechanism. The Sumit Sarkar part that I was talking about. Okay, for the elements of drain of wealth, if you have to categorize the elements, they can be broadly categorized into three categories. The first one and the major one, most of the chunk of drain of wealth happened via the first element, which was the home charges. It was called the home charges. Now, why it was called home charges? What were the elements of home charges? I'll come to it later on. But the first element of the drain means the money which is going from India to Britain, the first element of it was the home charges. The second element was the interests and profits that the company was making on the foreign investments in India. What they termed as investments, their railways, their mills, their telegraph channels, let's say their plantations were all the cash crop that they had planted. All that also had to be for the benefit of the empire, not for the people of India. But they called it investments. So all the profit and the interest which they earned on these investments, the railways, the plantations, the mills, etc., that was the second element of this drain. So first is home charges. Second is the profits and interests on the foreign investments. And the third is the cost that they are bearing on banking services, on shipping services, on trade, etc. So all the cost that the company is, let's say company is running some sort of banking service in India, but the cost of running that service, let's say the company is running some sort of shipping service in India, but the cost of running that shipping service is also taken from the people of India. So this is how drain functioned. First, the major part of drain was home charges. I'll deal home charges separately now. Second, the interests and the profits that the company earned on its foreign investments like railways, mills, plantations, etc. And third, the cost of maintaining banking services in India, the cost of maintaining shipping services, etc., was also taken away from the people of India. So these are the three major elements of the drain of wealth from India. Now let's come to the most complex part of the drain, which is the home charges. Now, most of the students fail to understand this part of drain of wealth. This is where the hook of the lecture lies. Had I been using a board or had I been using some sort of projection, I would have explained it very well, because drain of wealth can be explained in a very good diagram, which Sumit Sarkar has made in his book. That diagram I can't fetch right now because my book lies in Delhi and I am back in my hometown. Anyway, despite not having that diagram, let's try to understand what are the elements of home charges. So home charges is the element of drain of wealth, and home charges has certain other elements which in totality constitute what we call as home charges. So the first element of home charges would be the salaries and the maintenance cost of the Office of Secretary of State of India, who was located in London. It was called the India Office of London. So the Secretary of State, who was given the charge of managing the affairs of the company, his office costs, his salary, and the salaries of his employees, all the people, the personnel running the office, was given by the drain of wealth that happened from India. So let me repeat it. The first element of home charges would be the salaries and the cost of maintaining the India office in London, where the Secretary of State was located, where the Office of Secretary of State was situated. So all the salaries and pensions of the personnel working there and the maintenance costs there would be given by the Indian money, the drain which is going from India. Right? Let's come to the second element of the drain of wealth. Second element would be all the salaries and pensions which were given to the civil employees of British state, Let's say I'm an officer working for British state, working for the East India Company or the Crown later on. After 1857, it became the rule of the Crown. Let's say I'm an officer working under it. So my salary, my pension after my retirement will be given by the drain of wealth that the company is taking from India. They did not pay out of the British money. They would pay me out of the profits that they are making from the wealth of India. So first was the cost of Secretary of State and the India office located in London. Second is the salaries and pensions of the civil employees working for the company, working for the East India Company or working for the Crown. Third element would be the dividends. Since East India Company was a private company, run by so many people, and everyone had a certain share in it. It was you should study the history. I mean, had I taken another lecture, I would have explained you how East India Company was formed. So all these companies, all these nations, French, be it British, French, or Portuguese, all had their private trading companies in which there were shareholders. The basic design how the companies works, and each of the shareholders will have their own dividends. So the profits of those dividends were also paid by the Indian money, were paid by the profits that they made out of looting Indian people. Right? So first was the cost of Secretary of State of India office in London. Second, the salaries and pension of civil employees. Third, the dividends of the shareholders of the company of East India Company. The fourth major charge would be the cost of maintaining the military. If I am a military personnel employed by the East India Company or the Crown, my salary, my pension will also be paid by the money that they have taken from India. Money that they have taken from the people of India in the form of tax, in the form of private trade, in the form of loot, in the form of exorbitant charges. All that money to me will be paid from that money, from that loot. Right? So even the military cost, maintaining the military officers, maintaining the weaponry, maintaining the personnel, their salaries, their pensions, everything, their own cost, everything was given by the money that was being looted out of Indian people. And the last element of home charges would be the maintenance of office costs. Let's say I am running an office on behalf of British state, and my office has a table. My table has a pen holder. The cost of even buying that pen holder and the pen placed in that holder was given by the drain only. Imagine the office charges. And these office charges accounted for almost 10 to 12% of the home charges. That's a big amount of money. That's a big chunk of money. Right? So these are the particular elements of home charges which majorly amounted for the drain of wealth. Apart from these home charges, there were two other factors that I've already told you. First was the profits and interests which they earned from the investments in India, like railways, like mills, like plantations, etc. And the last was the profits or the costs which they had to bear while running the banking services in India or shipping services in India. So if they are giving any kind of service to Indian people, the cost of bearing that service is also taken from the drain of wealth, not from their own cost. So they were literally investing nothing in India. They did not kharcha even a single rupee from their own pocket. The British Empire did not use even a single pound sterling from their own pocket in order to develop the Indian resources, in order to develop the Indian agriculture, in order to develop, the irrigational services. Nothing of that sort. Everything that they did was done out of the money taken from the pockets of Indian people. Therefore, it is called unrequited wealth. Therefore, it is called unilateral flow of money without any return, without any profit. So I think this is all in all for drain of wealth. And if I get into how this drain of wealth theory was being used by economic nationalists, and this also gave birth to many other demands, the demands of the working classes, the demands of peasants working in plantations, the demands of mine workers, all those demands were one by one taken, the demands of people working in Assam plantations. All those demands, all those economic demands were taken by moderates one by one. And this all was effect of this drain of wealth theory. Had this theory not been there, the phenomena of Indian nationalism wouldn't even start. The phenomena of economic nationalism would not have been there. The success of Gandhian nationalism depends upon the theorization of economic nationalism, depends upon the theorization of drain of wealth theory by scholars like Dadabhai Naoroji, R.C. Dutt, G.V. Joshi, etc. So their contribution has been immense to Indian nationalism. Right. So the question may come, simply talking about the importance of drain of wealth theory, or how the moderates mobilized Indian people based on economic nationalism. They will simply mention economic nationalism, and by seeing the term, you will have to explain drain of wealth. You will have to explain the elements of drain of wealth. You will have to, in the body of the answer, after giving the definition, in the body of the answer, you will have to come to the home charges. You will have to come to the salaries that they were paying to the military people, that they were paying to the civil staff, that they used for maintenance of the office of Secretary of State in the India office of London, that they used for maintaining the banking services and the shipping services in India. All that will contain your body of the answer. And then give a single one-line conclusion about the bleeding wealth of India, and then your answer is done. So sometimes drain of wealth of theory may be a bit tough to understand for the new students of history. When I was studying history for the first time back in 2014-15, I also faced a lot of difficulty in understanding this. Thanks to one of the professors in college, in masters, who literally made me understand this via the diagram that the Sumit Sarkar book has presented. Had that diagram not been there, I would not have understood this theory. And that is the main reason why I have been able to understand this, because the functioning of colonialism was very complex process. It was not a very simple economic process which you can explain by simple economic terms. Right? You are when you study the functioning of colonialism, you are in a zone where you study all the economic events historically, and when you do that, things become a bit tough, because you have to be precise in your answer, you have to be precise in your information, and the moment you go haywire, your answer doesn't furnish the results that you expect. Right? So some topics are there in modern Indian history which need a certain level of elegance while dealing with them. Drain of wealth is, I think, one such kind of theory. I would have discussed some of the prelims questions based on it. In fact, when I start classes, the prelims questions based on drain of wealth are not that tough. But if it comes in mains, the explanation part may be a bit tough for the students. But if they understand these elements very well and then they revise it again and again, and then they keep on consulting the teacher whenever they face difficulty, I don't think there is much difficulty in delivering your answer. So I think this would be enough for the theory from my part for today. Thank you so much. I hope I've done justice to the topic.